Free League Publishing released the beta PDF for Dragonbane. I was able to print out the rules and read through them, and I wanted to share my thoughts about the rules. So let's get into this. Welcome to Solitary RPG. Recently, I took some time off from work, and it gave me an opportunity to print out and read the beta PDF for Dragonbane. I still think this is going to be a great rules system for solo gamers, and I wanted to share my thoughts about the rules in this video. I'm also going to share with you some of the edits that I found that need to be made in this rule book, such as this preface here. This is written in, I'm assuming, Swedish. This is a Swedish company, but it's not in English, so I don't know what this preface says. Don't know if it was done intentionally or if it was just an oversight, but there are little mistakes throughout the rule book that I will point out as we come across them. The book just jumps right into the rules. There's no long, 5, 6, 10 pages of background story to read through. Just jumps into, what is role playing? What are the different components that make up role playing and things of that nature. You're going to notice these two different types of blocks throughout the rule system. The lighter colored blocks are going to be rule specific. So like for this one, it's measuring time. A round is going to be 10 seconds. A stretch is going to be 15 minutes and a shift is going to be 6 hours. So these lighter colored boxes are actual rule specific, drawing your attention to them. The darker colored boxes, these are going to be optional rules. Depending on the group that you have playing, you may not want to use all the optional rules. Personally, after reading through the rules, I think a lot of them are a great way to enhance your gaming experience. Then you're going to jump into character creation. And there's 13 different steps you will go through to create your character. And pretty much all of these steps are going to have these charts that you can roll on. So if you don't want to choose your character and you want the dice to decide your character, you can just roll dice throughout this creation process. I really like charts like this for character creation, especially for solo gaming, because if you just need to create a detailed NPC and you don't want to sit there and go through the character creation process, having charts to just roll on makes it really simple and easy, and I really like that. First thing you're going to do is choose your kin. So these are the people that make up the world of Dragonborn. We have the humans, the halflings, the dwarfs, the elves, the mallard, and the wolfkin. Each kin is going to have a real brief introduction of how they fit in the world. And then there's going to be an ability. So this is going to be something that's different for each one of the kin to set them apart. And these abilities are going to have willpower points associated with them. And willpower is a resource that you're going to have to use these abilities. So they're just not free to use every time. I like having that resource spent to use abilities. It's really kind of cool. And then you're going to have a D6 chart for names for naming your PCs. Again, I love these charts. These charts are fantastic. Including them into the character creation just makes that so much easier. So yes, so you'll have your kin, you'll have your abilities. I did notice the mallard kin has 2 different abilities, and this one that says webbed feet doesn't have a willpower point associated with it. I also noticed the elf kin did not have willpower points associated with their inner piece. Now, webbed feet on the mallard kin, I understand, because that is a physical characteristic of the kin. And not having a willpower points associated with using that ability, I get. This inner piece for the elf kin, this is a very powerful ability. And having it for free, I don't know if that was an oversight or not. Basically, what the ability is during a stretch rest, which is only a 15-minute rest, you can heal an additional D6 HP, D6 extra willpower, and can recover from an additional condition. And we'll talk about some of these things later on in the chapter, especially the condition part. But this is very powerful for a stretch rest. I don't know if maybe this was supposed to be a shift rest, because that would actually have some risk involved if it's not going to cost willpower points. Because when the elf player has their is taking advantage of this inner peace. They go basically in such a deep meditated state that they can't be awoken from it, and that would actually cause possible danger to them. But for a stretch rest, which is only 15 minutes, and being able to heal additional HP and willpower and conditions, it just seems pretty powerful. So I don't know if that's a mistake or not, but if it's not, and this was done intentionally, that is a very powerful ability, and I'll probably play an elf. So after you've chosen your kin, you're going to choose your profession. Again, another chart to roll on, and your professions are going to give you a little bit of information about the profession. You're going to have your key attribute. So for this artisan, the key attribute is strength. You're going to have some skills. You're going to have gears. So you're going to actually have gear packages that you're just going to select or roll for. You're going to have some abilities, and then you're going to get cool nicknames, which I like. Some of these nicknames are really kind of fun, especially for the artisan. I like Stonehammer. And then there's Iron Master. Just cool little nicknames. I will be upfront though, the artisan is the one profession that's unique from all the rest, simply because the ability for journeyman, basically you have 3 different career paths as a journeyman, from blacksmith, carpentry, to tanning, leather goods. And each one of the weapons pack is associated specifically for the different journeymen. So if you're going to use the dice to roll, you're going to roll for your gear pack, and then whatever gear pack you're going to get will dictate which ability, what journeyman path you're going to take. This is the only one that is unique like that. The rest of them are pretty straightforward. They're going to have a simple ability and the skills and things that they can take, and you can choose whichever gear pack that you pretty much want. And for your careers, these are pretty basic careers. You got artisan, bard, fighter, hunter, a knight, a mage, a mariner, a merchant, a scholar, and a thief. So these are just the different careers you can take. I like how they're all laid out this way. Makes character creation so much easier. And then you're going to get into your age. So the age is important in this game, because your age will actually dictate your number of trained skills that you will have, and can also affect your attributes. So either you can roll on the chart a d6 to determine your age, or you may just pick your age. But if you're young, and it doesn't give you any type of years for your age, obviously, because each race would be a little different in determining who is young, adult, and old. If you're young, you get to take your agility and your constitution and give it a +1. And if you're old, you take your strength, agility, and constitution at -2, and your intelligence and willpower at +1. And then these are the number of trained skills. So having your age have some kind of a game mechanic addition to it, I really like. Then you're going to name your character, either using the charts provided or making up your own. And after you've done all this, then you're going to roll for your attributes. So this was a little bit of a change from what I'm traditionally used to in RPGs, because normally I roll up my attributes and then I take my attributes and decide what my character is going to be. Here, I've already decided a lot of my character, and then I'm going to start rolling up my attributes. And it's a simple system. Roll 4d6, get rid of the lowest, take the remaining 3. So your attribute scores will be anything from 3 to 18. And remember, your profession is going to have a key attribute. So for this thief, the key attribute is agility. The rules don't say it has to be your highest valued attribute, but you're probably going to want to make it one of your higher values, because a lot of the abilities and weapons and things are probably going to have a focus on agility, because that's why it's the key attribute. Something to think about when you start rolling your attributes. And then you have some other stats that you're going to come up with using your attribute scores, like movement. Every one of the kin will have a base movement, and then their agility score will modify that base movement, either minus or adding to that score. Your damage bonus, there's going to be 2 types of damage in this game. Strength damage, like bladed, handed weapons. And then you're going to have agility damage, which are going to be more ranged weapons, thrown weapons, things like that. And you're going to get an agility bonus for those based on your strength and your agility. This is one of those areas where I've noticed a mistake. For the damage bonus here, it says plus T4. When I first read that, I started going, what's a T4? And it dawned on me that this was a beta rules, and it was probably just a mistake. So just something to point out. Your hit points are going to be based on your constitution and your willpower. The willpower is your resource that you will spend to activate your abilities. If you're a mage, you're going to use your willpower to cast magic. And it's just your maximum that you can have is whatever this attribute is. And as you use it, you will subtract it from there. But then during a shift rest or a stretch rest, you can regenerate that willpower. It's going to be something that you can consume and renew throughout gameplay. So let's talk about skills. So this section needs some work from the publisher on a couple different levels. First of all, when I first read it, I'm reading this last sentence, and basically it says your skills are measured by your skill level on a scale of 1 to 18. The higher, the better. So this is a roll low system. So if you want to use a skill, you're going to need to roll a d20 and get under your skill level to succeed. Then the next section talks about base chance, which is here on the chart. Every skill is connected to an attribute, which determines your base chance in that skill. This is indicated on the character sheet and in chapter 3. The base chance is a free skill level that you get automatically. See the table to the right. So far, I'm tracking with everything. So I have an attribute score, and then I have a base chance. But what I noticed here is it's going to be on a scale of 1 to 18. Here it goes 1 to 19. And if it's an attribute score, the lowest score I can get in an attribute is 3 because we're rolling 3d6. So the lowest we can get is a 3. So I think that needs to be cleared up. Is the skill level different than an attribute, or I'm not quite sure. So it's something that needs to be cleared up. That just needs to be cleared up so it's a little bit better, just flows a little bit better. Then you're going to go into your starting skill levels. So in addition to your base chances, you start out with a number of trained skills, which we learned about trained skills here under the age. These are your trained skills. 5, 6, or 7, depending on your age. At the start of the game, your level in your trained skill equal to twice the base chance. So if I have a trained skill and my attribute is 10, base chance is 5. Now that trained skill becomes 10 because it's double. And 4 of your trained skills must be selected from selected from those listed by your profession. So if I am going to be a thief, I have to choose 4 of these skills. Well, for the most part, all of the professions have like 5 skills. I'm aware that Free League is adding more skills, and they're going to be releasing the PDF again. So you'll have more to choose from. But right now, you basically have 5. You have to choose 4. You're pretty much choosing them all. And they go to double. And obviously, magic is completely separate from your basic skills. So yeah, this section just needs to be reworked. This needs to be cleared up. It would have been nice to have an example. And it would have also been nice if they would have indicated, at this point, you want to select your skills, turn to page 35 so that you can actually read about your skills, because it's disconnected from this section. And to be honest with you, I think the skills probably should have been the next portion of this character creation in the book, because you're creating a character and you're going through the book step by step. It should have all flown. Just my opinion. I'm not a book designer. I'm not a game designer, but I do play these games. I consume this product, and it would have been nice just to move into the skill section next so I could have selected my skills and then moved into this section, motivation. Motivation, this is a really cool feature of the game. You want to either roll or pick a motivation, but it is actually important that you role play the motivation in the game, because when it comes at the end of the session and you're getting experience points so that you can level up your skills, one of the questions they're going to ask is, did you play to the motivations? So you want to make sure you select one that you can play, role play into. If it's not a motivation that you feel you can do, you may want to choose something else. Gear. So in this section, it just talks about gear and the fact that you get these gear packs that you can select for your PCs, which is pretty straightforward. But I do like the fact that they added the memento. This is like a trinket. If you're into watching Geek Gamers videos, she talks a lot about giving her characters a trinket. Same concept here, just something additional that you can add some flavor to your character. And then this box here, they talk about coins. So this is a gold system. You got gold, silver, and copper. And they talk about getting, being able to go purchasing additional gear. I was like, oh, cool. But then I started looking at the rules again. I couldn't find anything that gave me an opportunity to roll for gold. So I don't know how I'm supposed to go out and get additional gear. My assumption is that that's either going to be something based on the game master giving the PCs so they can go buy additional gear for the adventure they're about to go on, or in published adventures, maybe there's some starting gold or something that you start out with, or some starting currency to go out and buy your additional gear. But there's nothing I found in the character creation that let me roll to get additional gold. After gear, we go to encumbrance, which makes sense. Basically, this is a slot system where you have a number of slots equal to half your strength rounded up. So if my strength is 16, I have 8 slots. I can carry 8 items. Weapons at hand, helmets, and armor do not count towards your encumbrance. Weapons at hand are basically you have a sword strapped to a belt around your waist, maybe a hatchet and a knife somehow stuffed into your waistbands or something like that. And you don't count those towards encumbrance. Neither do you do armor or helmets. It's just everything else counts as encumbrance. Now, obviously, they tackle heavy items, saying that, depending on how heavy the item is, determines how many slots it takes up. And then tiny items not taking up a slot. So pretty straightforward on the encumbrance. And the last step you're going to take is your appearance. You got a D20 chart, and you just roll on it, or you can just pick one out. Hopefully you can weave your appearance into your motivations and make it kind of all work together. But yeah, that's basically the character creation. I just really like all the charts. I think that makes solo playing a lot easier, because sometimes as a solo player, I get wrapped up into picking kind of the same things over and over again. And this way now I can just let the dice roll and figure out what my characters are going to be. Really cool stuff. Then we're going to get into experience. This experience track is a little bit different than your D&D type style, where you go out and kill something, you get experience, and then you can level up your attributes. Here is when you make skill checks in the game, if you roll a dragon or a demon, you're going to make a mark next to your skill on the character sheet. These little diamond boxes off to the side here. You're just going to mark one of those off every time you roll a dragon or a demon. And then at the end of the game, your GM's going to ask you some questions. Did you participate in the game session? Yes or no? Did you explore new locations? Did you defeat one or more dangerous adversaries? Did you overcome an obstacle without using force? And did you roleplay according to your motivation? And then these, if you answer yes to them, you'll be associated to, I'm assuming, one of those skills. And then you're going to make an advancement roll. If you roll a d20 and you exceed your current skill level for a skill that was used during the game that you have a mark next to, you advance that skill by 1. So it's a unique system that will actually help you grow your character by doing things in gameplay. So you're not going to be able to advance your swordsmanship if you never used your sword. So you actually have to use the skill. It's almost rewarding you for certain behaviors in the game, which I really like, because now we're not just playing a bunch of murder hobos going around killing everything. We're going to want to overcome obstacles without using force, and we're going to want to play to our motivations, things like that. So it's a neat system. Also like this teacher concept. So if you don't feel your character is well-rounded enough and you want to improve on certain skills, you can do some intense training with a teacher who is skill level 15 or higher, and that can give you an additional bump. And that could also be something you do during your downtime, between sessions, something like that. It's a neat feature, and it could also have an expense to you, so you have to pay someone to do it. So it's just got some cool stuff. And then here we got some changing motivations. So when we were talking about motivations a little while ago, and I said choose it carefully, here's the reason why. You can't just change it willy-nilly. If you're going to change it, if it's no longer relevant or you just don't feel you are able to play to it and it's causing you a hindrance, you just need to be able to figure out why you're changing it. You need to talk it over with your GM or yourself if you're playing solo, and just make sure you can make your new motivation fit within the gameplay. Maybe an experience happens and it changes their outlook on life, and that's why you're changing your motivation. Then you get into heroic abilities. So your kin gives you an ability, your profession gives you some abilities, and now we have heroic abilities, which are completely different than the other two. You're not going to start the game with any heroic abilities. I made a note here for solo characters. I'll probably start with one just to give my solo character an advantage. But you don't get your first heroic ability until after your first game session, and then you get an additional one every 5 game sessions after that. So they're neat, but then when you go, okay, so where are the heroic abilities? Again, they start on page 37. So they're in this chapter on skills section, which is your next chapter after reading about heroic abilities. You come over to your skills and you start getting into your skills section. This part of the book just seems out of place to me. This probably should have been at the front of the book, to be honest with you. I don't like right up here where we're talking about, you got measuring time up here as a rule, where I think rolling the dice and talking about dragons and demons on the critical stuff and information like this probably should have been up towards the front. For whatever reason, they put it here on page 33 in the skills section. And I get rolling the dice are associated with the skills and all that kind of stuff. I just think it probably should have been earlier on in the chapter, because now we're going to get into the boons and the banes, which are basically advantage and disadvantage, rolling 2 dice and choosing the best or the worst of the 2 for your result. And then you get into opposed rolls, and then we get into skills. This whole chapter, this section, it's just everything's out of place, to be honest with you. I don't understand why the skills and the heroic abilities weren't put into the sections under character creation, and then all this rolling the dice, the boons, the banes, the pushing of the rolls, the opposed rolls should have all been put at the front of the book. It's just a personal preference. I'm sure they had their reasons for it. I just don't like where it lands in the book. So we get into rolling dragons and rolling demons. When you roll a 1 on a d20, this is a roll low system. So 1 is a critical success. It just talks a little bit about rolling that dragon and the things that you get for doing so. And then rolling failures, which is rolling a demon, rolling a 20, critical failure, same concept, some of the results for doing so. Then you get into banes and boons. So banes and boons are basically rolling 2 dice and then taking the best of the success, of the dice for the boons, which are positive, and banes, which are negatives. And then you also got helping others, which I think is a really cool mechanic for solo gameplay. If you have a sidekick or you're running with an NPC, they can actually help you in situations so that you can roll a boon or, for an attribute check or a combat check or something like that. So it's a neat part to have in the game. And then you have this portion here. Again, these are optional rules, pushing your rolls. So if you fail an attribute check, so if I was going to be taking a strength check to maybe move something out of the way and I failed it, I can push that roll. I can re-roll that, but then I take a condition for exhausted. So I really push myself. And what you do when you take a condition, you just mark it under your character sheet. Here's your stat blocks, and you just mark the box for the condition that you took. And then you have to do a stretch rest or a shift rest to remove those conditions. But it gives you something more to play into for your character in the game, which I really like. And we also talked about conditions when I was talking about the elves kin, because they got that special ability called Inner Peace where they can recover a condition. Well, you can have multiple conditions on your PCs if you keep pushing rolls because you're just having a bad dice moment, and you could end up with multiples of these, and the elves get to heal additional ones. So what a great ability. Opposed rolls, these are pretty straightforward. Just roll to see who's gonna win the opposed rolls. Then we're going to get into skills. Earlier in the book, they mentioned that there was 16 skills to choose from. There's really not. There's actually 10 skills to choose from. They just considered each one of the weapons as a separate skill, and your professions may not have access to all the different weapons. You're basically just getting a weapon skill, but they actually broke it down to the individual weapons. Sounds better to say 16 than 10, I guess. And hopefully this is going to get expanded on and give us more skill options, because when we were talking about your professions, most of them only have 5 skills and you have to choose 4 of them as your trained skills. It'd be nice that they expanded it, gave us more skill options. We'll see how that plays out as they continue to push forward with this book. But this gives you the attribute that it's related to and the information about the skill, and these are things that you get to do. Heroic abilities, these are different. As I said earlier, you don't get one until after your first game, and then you get one every 5 after that. But there's a whole bunch of them. There's over 30 of them. So we have more heroic skills, which we get less of, and we have very few actual skills that we have to choose more of. It's kind of backwards. But anyways, these actually cost willpower points to take advantage of. When you go to your character sheet, there's no place to actually write down specifically heroic abilities. You have your general abilities and spells, which the rulebook indicates this is where you would write your kin ability or your profession ability. But there's nothing for heroic abilities. Now, obviously, we're just going to write it here. Makes sense. I just feel your heroic abilities are something that are going to make your character stand out a little bit more, and probably should have a space specifically on the character sheet for your heroic ability. And it doesn't have anything like that. So just understand that you'll just write this under the general abilities category, even though it's your heroic ability. And then you're going to move into combat. Free League likes to use their cards for combat. They talk about the first thing is drawing your initiative, which is taking cards. Whoever has the lowest value, like the 1, goes first. If you don't like the cards, you can always just roll D10s, and if you roll a tie, it always goes to the PCs. Or you can just re-roll and figure it out from there. It's not that complicated. I don't like using the cards in solo play. Simply, that's just one more thing on my table, and I can keep track of everything. But in group sessions, I understand why the cards are used, because once you've activated your character, you flip your card over to indicate you're done. You have no more actions left, and that's it. And it comes in handy here because when we get into combat, there's actually ways of responding, which are things you can do outside of initiative order, but they take up your actions, such as parrying and dodging. But yes, use your cards. You have some information here about doing surprise, which is pretty straightforward. But here we get into actions. So during your turn, during your initiative turn, you can do 2 things. You can move and perform 1 action. Moving is pretty straightforward. Here are the actions you can perform, but then here are the free actions you can perform. So you actually have 2 different actions you can perform. Free actions are very simple, easy things that you can do. Draw a weapon. It has to be a weapon at the ready, at your side. changing positions, dropping an item, shouting, or persuading. So those are pretty simple, things you can do in very few seconds, where your actions are going to take up more time. So actions are anything from melee, ranged attack, parrying, dodging, taking cover, like picking up items, just a lot of things you can do. But that's how actions are broken down. During initiative, when you're going through a combat, if you're being attacked, though, you can actually have reactions. And reactions are going to be parrying attacks or dodging out of the way of an attack, but they use up your action for that turns or that round. So just that's how that's broken down. And then it gets into a little bit more specifics about all the different types of movement and sneak attacks and things like that. Using combat maps if you're into using the miniatures and things like that. Now we're going to get into melee. In this game, there's two types of melee. You're going to have melee with another NPC, another humanoid type character, which you're going to roll to hit and all that good stuff. And then you're going to melee with monsters from the monster or the bestiary in this book, and they are handled differently. So when I go through this, I'll try to point out those different things so that you understand that you'll have two different types of combat. But in melee, you're going to roll to hit. You got some different things that can take place with, prone targets and long weapons and all that kind of stuff. And you got your critical hits. But what really happens in melee is you can respond to attacks to you by parrying and dodging out of the way. And these are actions that you can take outside of the initiative order, which allow you to block attacks or get out of attacks. However, there's special rules. Like with monsters, you cannot parry an attack unless in the monster book or in the monster profile, it tells you can parry the attack. So that's important to remember. Not all attacks can be parried. And also in the rule book, which I like, is when you roll the demon in melee, you get a negative effect, and they actually give you a cool chart to roll on. So if you get into this game, really make sure you read through the combat, the melee section, because there's so much going on. Weapons have durability. You got piercing damage, blunt damage, like smashing damage. You got all kinds of stuff going on. And then you got this dodging and parrying. Really creates a more dynamic combat session. And then on top of that, you got all these special attacks, like finding the weak spot for piercing attack. So if I have a sword and I want to do a piercing attack, I can find the weak spot. I roll a bane on my attack. If I succeed, I find the weak spot and go right in to do damage. So I like that. You can topple, you can disarm, and you can grapple. So really cool, but these are all optional rules. You do not have to play with them. I think they're kind of cool. Then this section here talking about melee tactics. This is a really cool little snippet of information that talks about, like, in melee, you may not want to go first. You may want the monsters to go first or the NPC to go first. That way they expend their actions, and then you can strategize your response or your return action to that combat. So it's just a neat way of reflecting on melee tactics and not necessarily always wanting to run in the room, charge in, and smash everybody. Good stuff. Range combat, same thing. Talks about all the different things for range combat, giving you the same demon chart if you roll a demon during range combat. And then we get into damage. And this is one of the parts about this rules system that I really feel is going to help for solo gaming because of the way they handle death. Once you go to 0 HP, you're not dead. You start making death rolls, and basically that's a constitution check. If you make a successful constitution check, you come back, and you come back with D6 HP, and you can get back into the fight. Also, NPCs or sidekicks or whatever you're using to run with your character, they can try to rally you and persuade you to come back into the fight. So even if you're at 0 HP, they can try to bring you back into the fight so that you can keep going. I really like this. I want to steal this idea for other games, so that way when a character I'm playing goes to that 0 HP, it's just not like game over. I have a chance of coming back in the game, and I really like that. And then we have this really cool chart for permanent injuries, which is always neat to have. When something happens to you on the battlefield, you just have more information to add to your character description and a fun story to tell. So I really like this stuff. There's also instant death. So it's always good to have instant death, even though we have this cool death roll system and everything like that. They understand that some people may want to take advantage of that. So they created an instant death roll. So basically, so if I decide to go pick a fight with a dragon and it does enough HP to meet my actual HP value, so if I have 12 HP and it does one attack that would put me at like negative 12 HP, yeah, it's just instant death. So don't pick fights with dragons. And then we're going to get into conditions again. As we talked about earlier, conditions are when you push your rolls. This is just more information covering conditions and giving you some additional ideas with it. So, and then we get into healing and resting. This is what we talk about, the stretch rest, which heals D6 HP or 2d6 HP if someone else is tending to your wounds for healing. And you also, during a stretch rest, recover 2d6 willpower. So your willpower is something you can regenerate. The stretch rest is the 15-minute rest. And then you have the shift rest, which is a 6-hour rest. And you just heal better. That's what happens there. These other hazards, this is great. Add-ons to the game. Dealing with darkness, dealing with fear, poison, disease, falling, swimming and drowning, hunger, cold, and sleep deprivation. So all of these different conditions cause effects in the game that you need to contend with when playing. And if you don't, they could kill you, such as hunger, cold, and sleep. So I like that. Riding animals, they give you some really brief information about riding animals and combat on horseback and things like that. Improvised weapons, very nice to have in a rule system. I've always kind of used it, but there's a reason why we have it in this system, because your weapons actually have a value that they can take so much damage, and when you parry, your weapons can actually take damage and break. So having improvised weapons comes in handy, because if you break your main weapon and you have no weapons to use, you may have to grab something close by. And a lot of people like to use those pre-printed battle boards and things like that for their gameplay. If there's items already on there, you can just use the environment, and which is always cool. But if you do like myself, I play with Theater of the Mind, I can roll on an oracle to see if there's any improvised weapons around and start swinging those if I have to. So, but they have a nice little rule on that. Magic. I did not read the section on magic, and I will not read the section on magic until after I played the game a few times to make sure I have a good grasp of the rules before I add in this level of complication to the game. So we'll get back to magic on another day. And then you come into the weapons. The weapons are really cool because the supply for weapons tells you if these are weapons you should be able to have access to or not, because you have common, uncommon, rare, and unique. And under the description, they tell you like a great helm is a very rare item. It costs 100 gold and it's got a +2 armor rating. So you're not going to just be throwing those around willy-nilly all over the battlefield. You're probably just going to have like leather armor, which is very common. Studded chainmail armor are actually kind of uncommon, and plate and is rare. So yeah, I like it. And then there's actually effects of the armor. Mostly the armors give you banes when doing like mobility, sneaking, things like that. But I like that. And then you also have, if you go further on, it gets into like some of the keywords for all the different weapons, so you have an understanding how to read the charts. And then there's just lots of charts. So your melee weapons are lots of different melee weapons. But the features of the melee weapons tell you, if they're long, if they're piercing, if they're bludgeoning, just the different types of damage that they can do, because that's actually important, because you can't find a weak spot in armor with a bludgeoning weapon, only a piercing weapon. So you need to know what features your weapons have, and then everything else. If it's a one-handed, two-handed, then you got your range, your damage, and all that good stuff. Then it just keeps going. Then we get into musical instruments and clothing and trade goods, and this is just random stuff. And then you get into lights and tools and containers and medicine. It's just a very extensive list of items that you can go shopping for. Unfortunately, I don't know where you get your gold from at the beginning of the game. Obviously, after you start playing, you get your gold. Then you get into your beastery. This will give you some basic information. Monsters attack differently. Make sure you read this section under monster attacks. Monsters just hit. So this is the other side of that melee section I was talking about, being two different types of melee. The NPC type of melee, and then your monster attacks. Monsters just hit. You just respond. Also, monsters roll on a chart to determine what attacks they do. So I like this a lot, especially for solo play, because now we can add a little bit more to our combats, just making them a little bit more flavorful, not just I rolled a hit, you rolled a hit, I rolled a hit, you rolled a hit. So cool stuff. One of the things you want to also pay attention to is ferocity for your creatures. This is listed in their stats, because this is the number of attacks that they get. So this demon actually gets 2 attacks. So if you're doing cards, they get dealt 2 cards, and those attacks will take place in the initiative order that they are dealt. And when you do your 2 attacks, you roll on the chart. You cannot do same attack twice in a row. So you need to make sure you're kind of tracking your attacks, and you're not duplicating your attacks in a row. So if this first attack, the demon does 2 attacks, I can do any of these once. And then the next attack, I just can't repeat the last one I did, is how I'm reading the rule. They just can't be the same 2 attacks in a row. And then you get into the movement armor. It's pretty straightforward stuff. But when you're flipping through here, you're going to notice not all the creatures are the same. The goblin, if you notice, will not have this chart with it, nor will the orcs or the skeletons. I'm left to assume, even though at the beginning they're talking about monsters, and they say all monsters just attack, and you have to roll on this chart. Goblins, orcs, and skeletons, I believe you treat them like NPCs, because they don't have a chart, so they're going to repeat the same attack. And they have skill levels and everything like that. They actually even have damage bonuses. So my assumption is you would treat these 3, goblins, orcs, and skeletons, as NPCs, which opens up all of these special attacks that you can do, which were found earlier on when we were talking about finding the weak spot, toppling, and all that. You can take advantage of all of your special attacks, because you can grapple. These are like humanoid NPCs, so you can grapple with a goblin, but you can't grapple with a griffin. Probably not recommended, but with a goblin, you probably could get away with it. So it's just something I noticed when I was going through the books, that these 3 monster types are treated more like NPCs, where the rest of them have the special chart. That's just something to pay attention to. I don't know what the right answer is. That's how I'm going to treat it. And then we get into the adventure section. I think this is where this game starts to really shine for solo gamers, just because of all the information that they're providing in the charts for you to roll up adventures and NPCs and cool stuff like that. So this game is going to follow a lot of like Forbidden Lands and Twilight 2000 with journeys. It's going to be that overland adventure. You're going to break the day down into 6-hour blocks. So you'll have 4 blocks per day where you got to do a bunch of different tasks during the blocks. But they're pretty cool about telling you, look, In long journeys, like if you're going across longer stretches of time or places, don't do the very detailed hex crawl. Just kind of put yourself there, or maybe just do a few things along the way. Don't grind through that unless you really like grinding through that kind of stuff. They're saying that that level of travel should be for shorter distances, maybe for a couple days or a week, where you grind through those steps. But for the longer journeys, just kind of either go right through it or just have a few stops along the way at adventure sites along the way. So I like that. But yeah, it's going to break all that stuff down, mainly right through here, the making of the camp, the hunting, and all that. They're going to have a mishap table. So if you fail your Pathfinder roll, you're going to roll on the mishap table. This here, it talks about random encounters, and during your journey, you can run into a random encounter. But then going through the book, I could not find the table it mentions, because it mentions a random table, a random encounter table, but I couldn't find one in this book. Reading further down, it made mention that the random encounter tables would be found in the adventures themselves. I'm hoping this gets remedied when it goes into final print, that they actually add a randoms encounter table to the rule book. But if not, hopefully the adventure that comes with the box set that this will be included with will have a cool table that we can use, or it'll be on a GM screen. But there is not one in the book. And anyways, this goes into all the other making camp and things here for dangerous locations. So in the rules, you take a shift rest or a stretch rest. And if you're in a dangerous location, you cannot take a shift rest. You can't rest for 6 hours to recover all your HP and willpower. And it says if you need to take a shift rest, you actually need to leave the dangerous location, take your shift rest, and then come back. Which is, like if you're in a dungeon, that would be pointless. But you can take a stretch rest if you're in a dangerous location, which is your 15-minute quick rest. And they probably should have just mentioned that under dangerous locations that you can't take a shift rest, but you can still take a stretch rest if you're in a dangerous location. But yeah, that's just something I noticed. Then we get into the Game Masters section of the rulebook. Right off the bat, this is pretty straightforward stuff, giving you some tools that you can use, about being a better game master and things like that. But they give you a lot of cool charts. So you got your typical NPCs, which is just a short little chart that has some basic statistics for some relatively common positions within the world of Dragonbane. And you can just pull from that. But if you want to create your own, they have this cool little chart where you pick up all the different dice, a D4, D6, D8, D10, D12, you roll them, and then you just start going through, and based on the values rolled, select your character or create your NPC. And it gives you some basic information, from their attitude, their kin, their motivation, their profession, their traits, and their names, choosing one. And I like this. This is just a real fun way. So if you just need a real quick NPC on the fly doesn't need statistics, like this one actually gives you some HP and some damage bonuses and their skills. This is just going to give you an NPC that you can just talk to, and you just need to create some sort of a presence. Who is this person? And then you can do that. And then once you've done that, if you want to turn that person into an actual full-fledged NPC, then you can just go through the character creation and just flush out the rest of that character. I like this. These are cool charts. And then you get into creating an adventure. You're going to have a quest, a journey, and the adventure sites. You got 3 different charts that you can roll on, which is really neat. And then talking about some of the uniqueness about the rules system. Over here, we talked about dangerous locations and leaving dangerous locations. Over here, if you're leaving an adventure site or a dangerous location, there's a little chart you can roll on for something negative happening to you for leaving the dangerous location. Just seems a bit out of place, but I understand this is the GM's guide, and you may want to keep that section hidden from your players. But it is just in a kind of weird spot, in my opinion. But a quest is going to be your overarching story, your big story. Your journeys is going to be the path you're going to take, and then your adventure sites are just going to be locations you're going to visit along the way. And you get the same type of charts. Roll all the dice, and then just go through and start picking out the results, and you create your quest. This was done also in Forbidden Lands. It was done a little differently in Forbidden Lands, but the same concept. You're going to have a little text. One day, whatever your result is, around the warmth of a campfire, the PCs came across gossip, and then you just kind of keep going, and that will create everything that you need to at least get you started in the right direction. And you have one for the quest, one for the journey, and one for adventure sites. And it's just rolling a fistful of dice. I like that. I wish somebody would just make a book of nothing but charts like this for solo play that we could just have a lot of fun with. Maybe there's one out there. I haven't seen it. It'd be fun to have one. And then over here, we got typical traps. Be honest with you, I don't get really carried away with traps, but this gives you 3 basic traps you can look at, which I think is perfect. Don't need to get too complicated with traps. They're either going to find them or not, and they're either going to disarm them or not, and then something's going to happen to them or not. So pretty straightforward. And then we get into treasure, and they actually talk about typical short adventures should only have 3 to 5 treasure cards. So Freely likes their cards. They want to give you adventure card or treasure cards, and they talk about in this section about treasure cards of either just laying them out in the table, so when your PCs come across the treasure, they can just pick from them, or putting them in specific locations, and then if they find them during gameplay, they get those treasure cards. But it's just neat, and they give you kind of an idea of how much treasure you should put out for your typical games, which is kind of cool. And then the last thing, we'll talk about campaigns. This is really brief information about campaigns, but it gives you a little bit of insight. If your character dies, how to bring the character back and how to ramp them up to continue on with the campaign. And then you got your character sheet. So that was my quick run through of Dragonbane, which was not coming out officially until August of 2023, but they've got the beta PDF out for people to review. There's little typos, little mistakes, things that need to be cleaned up. I think the biggest thing out of all of this is the skills section, where they talk about getting your skills. I think this section needs to be cleaned up or clarified. And then there's just some little things throughout the book that just seem a little bit odd to me, but I'm used to, like, a lot of rule books out there have some odd placements of information, and sometimes you got to flip back and forth. One of the advantages for backing the Kickstarter is we will get the actual PDFs of all this information when it's released. And if we need to print out pages to make the game easier, we can just print out the few pages that we might need and put them in different spots in our books. I could just print the whole thing out and just reorganize the book myself and just bind it together, because that's something I enjoy doing. But I do see all this is going to be a great game for solo gaming, especially with all the charts. These charts are just going to take you out of your comfort zone, let the dice decide what happens, and kind of push you in a direction you may not normally go. And that's what I like about it. And that's why I think it's going to be a great game for solo adventuring. And I know they're going to have solo rules for this game when it comes out. I don't know what those rules are going to look like. If they're good rules, then I'll just use their solo rules. If not, I'll just create my own. But only time will tell. And once we get those solo rules, we'll be able to make a decision if they're good or not. But until then, that's about it. So thank you very much for watching, and have a great day.